Does it sound all right on your end there?
That sounds so good, man. That sounds so good. Wow, what a lovely introduction. Uh, this is Sean Taylor for Blues in Britain as part of the How Musicians Work series. And today I'm delighted to be joined by a fantastic songwriter, brilliant guitar player, beautiful singer, a touring troubadour, troubadour's tour. But anyway, a fantastic troubadour, someone who I've seen live who is absolutely brilliant, brings together so many different styles, genres, and yeah, it's fantastic. And we're very lucky to have Chris Smither tour in the UK very soon. So welcome, Mr. Chris Smither.
Thank you, Sean. It's good to see you again. Have I seen you since Sydney?
No, I don't think so.
Sydney.
That was a
So,
long time ago.
yeah,
So what's
that
been
was.
happening?
Oh God, I was I had my rehearsal for retirement during the pandemic, and then I was supposed to be over in the UK last year, and then I got sick. I got COVID and had to cancel at the last minute. And it looks like we're finally going to get it done again. Going to get over and do a bunch of dates, but keep my fingers crossed. That nothing gets in the way.
Well, we're delighted to have you back. I'm really, really, really happy to have you back. We're going to go through the dates in a little while, but I was going through your albums the last week or so, and fantastic, really beautiful music, as I knew, and I
Thank you.
love the songs, really, really great. And I just want to go back to you were born in Miami, but you moved to New Orleans, and I remember this great story that you tell on your live album about a fruit seller who used to sing the things he had for sale. And I just
Right.
wondered, is that quite indicative of what New Orleans was like growing up? Was music around you all the time? Or was
It
that
was. It is. It's an interesting question. You bring it up. And I guess it was, I didn't think too much about it at the time. It was, I actually wrote a whole song about that. Because people are always asking me, what was it like growing up in New Orleans? How did it affect your music? And I have no idea. And I say in the song, it's like asking a fish what he thinks about water. Well, fish don't think about water. It's just what's there, and and I didn't really. There's a lot of things that, like when I moved out of New Orleans and when I moved up to the Northeast, because now I live in Massachusetts, which is northeast coast of the states, and it is very different. But I wasn't really that aware of it at the time. When I was a kid, growing up, I mean, there was music everywhere, and some of it was professional level, and some of it was quite amateurish. Just,
yeah.
but the thing that was different was that it was everywhere. I mean, it was everywhere. Every door that you passed, there was music playing. Not if it wasn't live music, it was recorded music, but it just filled the whole place, and I guess that's I, I don't really think about that, until somebody points it out.
And that song is, am I correct me if I'm wrong? It's No Love Today, right? The one about the fruit. So is
Oh,
that
the
right?
one about the fruit and vegetable man, yeah, that's No Love Today. That was my guy, and they used to be these sort of itinerant fruit and vegetable men used to be all over town. They all had their neighborhoods that they would go through, and sort of territorial, and but they're really not there anymore. Um, there's no housewives anymore. they used to
Okay.
they used to depend on women being at home and coming out to to buy the the produce and whatever it was that they had for sale. But everybody's working these days, and if they're not, they're looking for a job. So
Absolutely, absolutely. And when you the first instrument was it a ukulele that you played? The first instrument, is that right?
yeah, that's right. I thought it was a guitar. I think I was 9 years old. I, I found it in the attic. It was my mother's, and I had an uncle. My dad's brother was a musician, a very good one, and he taught musicology at the university level. And I brought it down to show him, and I said, I got this guitar. And he said, that's not a guitar. He says, that's a uke. And he said, you want to learn how to play it? And I said, yeah. I mean, I had no idea, you know. When he said, "Do you want to learn how to play it?" I thought, "Oh, he meant I'm going to take lessons." And he says, "No, I'll show you how to play it."
And he did.
And he did.
And the
Yeah, it
first
was.
guitar, what was the first guitar you remember?
Well, I love that. I love that ukulele, and I was addicted to it for a couple of years, and then the family, my family moved to France for a year. My father was professor in charge of a junior year abroad program at the university, and so we were living in Europe for a year, and the family was living in Paris, but my father was traveling all over. And I missed that uke. I hadn't brought the uke with me. I really missed it. And my father came back, and it was my 12th birthday, and he brought me a guitar back from Spain. And he said, "Here, you think you can handle it? There's two extra strings. You think you can handle it?"
What guitar was it? What did you say? What made guitar was it?
It was a tatai, and it was made in Valencia, and I still have it. It's a wreck. I should have it in here if I'd known you were going to ask me this question. It's hanging up on the wall in the next room.
You can grab it if
It's,
you want, but we don't have to. Maybe in a bit you can tell me about it. But
I'll tell you about it later.
you can
I'd
tell me
have to
about
pull all
it.
my ears out and everything to
It's
go
all
get
good.
it.
It's all good. Can you remember, like, because you talk? I mean, there is a massive blues element to what you do, and like you
Oh
talk a
yeah,
lot about Lightning Hopkins and
yeah.
the great Lightning Hopkins, Texan bluesman. I mean, when was the first time you heard blues, and what was the impact of that?
Well, I think the first time I heard blues was probably around 14 or 15 years old, you know, and I was Josh White, you know. I was into folk music. My parents were into folk music, you know, but I mean, we're talking about 40s from the 40s, you know, and people like Burl Ives and Josh White, and there was a whole collection of sort of folkies at the time. And I didn't really know that Josh White was blues. I just kind of dug it, you know. I didn't really know what blues was, to to, to be quite candid with you. And I didn't really understand it until I went to Mexico City because I originally I was going to be an anthropologist. That's what I was to
Right.
before
Well,
and I was really interested in South American cultures pre-Columbian, you know, and before the conquest, and I was learning Spanish. I went to Mexico City for one thing to learn Spanish, and I was a roommate. I had as a roommate a guy from Texas who was really into. And I was playing a lot of guitar and singing a lot. I love to sing. I love to play, and I think Joan Baez had just made her first record. I was really into that, you know, and and then I played something I'd learned from Josh White, and my roommate, this guy named Tom Whitten. He was from Centerville, Texas. He said, "You should listen to this guy, man." and he handed me this album. We had a little record player in the room there, and it was a Prestige Bluesville album. It was called Blues in My Bottle, and it was Lightning Hopkins. And I was just I was captivated. I couldn't I I kept listening to it, and I said, "Okay, now which one of these guys is Lightning Hopkins?" He says, "There's only one guy playing." and
absolutely.
you know, I said, "Oh, I mean that was it." When I realized how much could be done with one guitar and one voice, and I didn't think to myself, "This is blues." What I thought was, "This is rock and roll, and it's being played by one guy. I don't have to get a band."
And you
if
were
I
off.
can, if I can learn how to do this, I don't need a
And so
band.
when you started out your seat, and then you moved to Boston after you, is that right? After you were in New Orleans, and then you moved to Boston. And was that
I
right?
went. I was in Mexico City. Then I went back to. I went back to New Orleans. I was in university at this point, and then I went to Paris for a year. I was still pursuing my academic career, and in Paris it all fell apart because all I did was go to cafes and play in the subway and play my guitar and meet other guitar players and singers and you know, Dylan was becoming a big thing, and we're talking 1964, you know, 65.
Wow.
I came back to the States, sort of half acidly tried to do, you know, one more year of university. That was my fourth year, and I finally just gave it up, you know. And I started meeting people. I met Eric von Schmidt, who was part of, he played a lot of blues guitar and sang and was a really good songwriter, and he was hanging, you know, and he said, you should get up to New York, you know, you got to get up. I met him in Florida because he used to spend his winters there, but he said, you should come up to New York or up to Cambridge, Massachusetts, and there's a lot of people up there would love to hear you. And so I took that as the word of God, you know. I just, I'd been told, you know, so I went, you know. It was,
It's
I
great.
was
Sorry,
cast
Chris, I
forth
apologize.
from the belly, you know, from the belly of the whale into the middle of the whole scene in the '60s. You know, it was
It
pretty
sounds an
amazing.
amazing time. That that's,
It was, yeah.
it's interesting because you're really glad that you mentioned songwriting because your songs are fantastic. I love your songs and the lyrics are really great. And it's interesting you also mentioned the ukulele because this is something I've said in a couple of interviews that in England. I don't know what it's like in America, but if you go to a music shop in England, you'll find 1,000 books on how to play the ukulele, and there'll be like 3 books on how to write a song. And one of those books will be a mindfulness book that will tell you, which is cool. I don't mind the hippie stuff; it's nice. But I was just curious about that because I always think in England songwriting is very overlooked as an art, and the reason I've started doing this series is because I love talking to artists, like great artists like yourself, about the way you work, the process you use for creating. And I'm just
Mhm.
curious about that. How do you work? And could you talk a bit about how you got into writing songs? I know there's 2 questions, but kind of related.
Well, I got into writing songs because you know, when I left New Orleans and moved up to the Northeast, and I was having a lot of fun, but I had only, I think I'd written 2 songs at the by that time, and it became apparent to me, and you know, I was having the time of my life. I absolutely loved what I was doing. You know, I
Mm.
loved performing. I love to get up on stage and just, you know, have people take my trip. You know,
Yeah.
I'm the trip master. You know, and I get to do this, and if I do it right, everybody has this wonderful time. So, and it didn't take me long to realize that the only people who were going to get anywhere doing this were people who were writing their own material. You know, you know, much as I loved, you know, people who were doing covers, I I realized that it wasn't going to cut it for me. I had to do something. I had to do some original stuff, and so it was. I had to force myself into it, and I sat down and started working at it, and I came up with some tunes. Now it was kind of hit or miss at first, you know, because I would wait for inspiration to hit, which is a big mistake. You know,
We all do.
you know, um, what it takes a long time to learn that inspiration, you know, is something that comes to the prepared mind. You know,
Yeah.
you have to be actively looking for it. I forget who it was that said it's like fishing. You, you know, you you may not catch a fish, but you're certainly not going to catch a fish if you don't have your line in the water. You know,
Absolutely.
it's a,
Absolutely.
and you know, over the years, it hasn't really become any easier. The only thing that's changed is that I realize that if I persist, it will happen. I'll get it done. You know, and I'm always surprised to find out how much concentration it takes and how much persistence it actually takes and how unwilling I am time after time. As many times as I've been through, and I don't write all the time. I write when I decide it's time to come up with a new batch of tunes, you know, and make a record. And time after time, I have to relearn the discipline to just sit and wait and think. And then, the first thing that this popcorn keeps going off in my head says, oh, well, well, now would be a good time to go get a cup of coffee. No, you can't do that.
Yeah.
You gotta sit here and wait, and think, and it will come, and usually the songs, when they start to come, the first one is very tough, and it's almost like pulling teeth, and then gradually it's like working out at the gym or something. You build up these songwriting muscles, and it comes. And there's you can read. I've said this on stage many times. That you can read 100 interviews with songwriters, and if you ask them how do you write songs, they'll start a long, involved explanation of how it's done. But at some point, they will say, there's actually an element of mystery to it. See, that's the tip off that they don't really know.
Absolutely,
They
absolutely.
don't know how to do it. They know how to make it happen, but they don't know how it actually works, and there's something that takes over, and it's the rest of it is, there's a large element of craft to it that it takes time to learn, not to state the obvious, but to what you want to do is say something that may seem obvious in hindsight, but you haven't said it in an obvious way. You know, that's a cute trick.
Absolutely, I like that. So, but you say you have to relearn it. You think each time you relearn it, you come in at a different angle with a different mindset, or how does it work? Well, I mean,
It's
would
not,
you?
it's, well, what happens, I'll sit here and I'll have some kind of little riff, you know, that's a nice little, that's something I'm working on now, Bum, 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 bum. Oh, sorry, I got lost. Anyway, then I just get a tune against it, and I go. And then gradually, as I start singing, I get a melody against it, and then I start trying to. I just do this scat singing, of nonsense syllables. And if you didn't know I was singing nonsense syllables, you would just think you weren't close enough to understand the words. But there aren't any words, so it would sound something like this. My little bird, she's getting older. My little bird, she's getting colder. Holy lot of Beatles on my boat. I had a long road, find my way, headed but he wouldn't say. Okay, now you hear that? That's the first real line that I got, but he wouldn't say.
It's beautiful. And
And
is
then
that not a song yet? Is that's becoming the song?
it's becoming a song, yeah.
It's beautiful.
But now I'll take that line and say he wouldn't say. I just write that down. No, he wouldn't say. I'll have the form written out, and I'll put that line in like where it belongs. Say,
Yeah,
okay, now
yeah.
what the hell is going on? And it's like I've said this before too. It's like talking to a part of your brain that you're not really on speaking terms with. So you sort of have to be shy around it. You can't really confront it. So, what the hell are you talking about?
I was curious about you where you talk about the rhyme because I love. I'm gonna pick a couple of songs out that I thought that I particularly like of yours, and the way in which the form of the rhyme and the meter, what do you call it, is first of all,
Mm,
I am the ride, I am the ride. I love that song. I'm
thank you.
gonna read some of the lyrics out. I awoke and someone spoke. They asked me in a whisper if all my dreams and visions had been answered. And I don't know what to say. I never even pray. I just feel the pulse of universal dances. I love that.
Yeah.
What were you? Can you tell us about that? How that song happened?
uh, it's a I don't never call myself a Buddhist, but I do a lot of things that Buddhists do. And it's an attempt to explain um, the conviction that nobody with a definite picture of an afterlife or a God or a religion has got it right. But at the same time, it's very hard to escape the feeling that there's something going on, you know. So you try not to nail it down. You just try to express the inexpressible, you know,
Beautiful,
and
man.
you try to move with it, you know. It's just like, and I'm in the middle of that same sort of feeling now, and trying to write this next batch of tunes. You know, one of the things that I dearly love about living in the 21st century is things like the James Webb Space Telescope, because it enforces a sense of humility. You know,
Okay.
and you look at it and you say, it is so big, and you don't have a clue.
Yeah.
You know, your best efforts have resulted in you not having a clue. And then when you go from that's the macro, then you go down to the micro, and you get down into quantum physics, and everything becomes simply a product of your observation. It's not real. You know, well, Buddhists have been telling us that for years. It's not real.
And the universal dancers thing, was that an image you saw, or could you talk about that?
It's I I'm reluctant to define it, and I'm not even sure I can myself, but it conveys an image to me of rhythm and a harmony on a universal scale and I don't care what it means. I don't
Sounds
care.
great.
I just listen to it.
I love it. I kept thinking of Dago with the dancers on. Maybe it's just me. I got to ask a little bit about because the guitar thing with you. I remember when I saw you live, fantastic guitar player, and there's this kind of
Thank you.
pulse to what you do. And I asked Eric Bibb about, is it called Travis picking? Is it? He mentioned a guy before Merle Travis who did it, whose name I've forgotten, who's an African American guy. And I just wondered about your style because I was curious because maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but when I've seen you play with one thumb pick and
Yeah,
two finger picks. So yeah, two. That kind of a banjo thing because not with you wouldn't have the another finger. Is that a banjo technique or am I way off with that?
it's a well banjo Scruggs picking as
That's
opposed to strumming, or frailing. The
yeah,
banjo, Scruggs style banjo is three fingers. It's thumb and two fingers.
right.
But people have been playing guitar with their fingers long before they ever started playing with a plectrum, with a pick. Um, Spanish guitar has always been with the fingers, and Spain is where the guitar actually was first really developed into its own instrument as differentiated from the lute or ouds or whatever. There's a
Yes.
million instruments just like it in principle, but finger picking is. I have a feeling that I mean, they call it Travis picking because that's what Merle Travis always did, and he was
Yeah.
one of the few country stars that actually played with his fingers. But people have been playing with their fingers forever and ever. And I remember Muddy Waters talking about when he went to Chicago, and he said, I was still playing with my fingers. They had to hand me a pick and say, "Oh no, you can't play like that up here."
And I remember another thing about watching you play, which blew my mind, was your foot, the tapping of your foot. It was like
Yeah,
incredible, and it's just amazing. Who needs a drummer when you got Chris Smithers tapping the foot? And it was just so great. It was just so on the. And I don't know if you had a stomp box, you had a pedal board. Remember that? But is
yeah.
that always
Well,
been the way you play, or
yeah. It took me a long time to learn I had to mic my feet, and it was my first records. My producers would keep telling me, "Don't tap your feet. Don't tap your feet." I go, I can't play if I don't tap my feet. It's just
that's
like
your sound, man?
love it.
Tapping feet.
But and it's heel toe instead of just boom boom or heel. It's heel toe heel. It rocks back and forth,
Right.
and I do fours in the left foot and twos in the right foot. So it's and it's
It's ma-
sometimes I do three against two. Which is, let's see. No, that's not right. I can't even do it anymore. If I think about it, I can't do it. But
it's great. It's so
three
cool.
against two sounds like this. And so, if you start doing threes in your right foot and twos in your left foot, it gets you into some funny territory. But if you have to think about it, there's no point in even trying.
It's great. It's the tray for me. I remember just because we were doing a guitar at the festival, and I remember it was a guitar, one of these guitar forums where there's a bunch of us sitting around like a kind of AA
Right.
meeting or something, all sitting, keep doing a song each, and you were sitting next to me, and I was just your foot, which is so great. It was so in the pocket, and But I'm gonna move on to one more song, another song, which is "Train Home," which is
Uh,
I've written this down, which is a foot tapping, finger clicking, stunning song. And I was trying to find the last bit of that sentence, but it was definitely the foot tapping, finger clicking, stunning song. And yeah, stop my heart and sink it like a stone, and I'm waiting on the train to take me home. That's so great. It's just a really. Can you remember where you were when you wrote that song?
that's a good question. I was home. I was at home. I remember the first place I played it live. It's always scary the first time you play a song out, for people. And I played it in Fall River, Massachusetts, at a club. What's that place called? I can't think of it at the moment, but it's a great room, and the crowd reaction was amazing. I, I played this song, and the crowd just exploded. They loved it, and I said, "Oh, I better remember that one."
It's a big song, man. It's a show-stopping song, I think.
But it's turned into one of the big ones for me. It's not in terms of other people doing it, but just in terms of the crowd. My audience will wait. There's certain songs that they wait for. And that's one of them for sure. So.
It's a great song. It's a great song. So go back a little bit to talk about songwriting because I said like with this series, the thing I've repeated myself a little bit, but I'm just curious a little bit to say like a working day for you. Like, is it just you said if you're working on a record, you've got to get songs done, but do you have a specific number of things you have to do every day creatively, artistically, in terms of guitar playing, in terms of your craft, in terms of your
Yeah, usually I do. If I'm going to be productive, I have to get rigorous. I have to get disciplined about it, and that's part of it. That's how part of the hardest thing. It can take me weeks to get into that rhythm, but it involves mostly being home, uh, so that I have one place to go to that's set up for me. And I'm in the room now. I mean, as you see me, I'm in the room
yeah.
that I normally work in. And, I get up and, get some breakfast. I got to take the dogs out. They need, they need a run. And so we go out for an hour or so and then come back. And then I have to warm up. I got to play for at least a half an hour. And it's gotten to the point now, I'm old now. I mean, my hands are stiff, I got arthritis and my thumbs, and so it takes a little while to warm up, and then I start working on the tunes, and I go back and forth from this chair, and then right over there where I'm pointing is a desk, and I'll go over there and I'll just sit there. There's a big nice chair at the desk and good light and a pad of paper.
And are you a notebook person or a phone person or both for writing songs?
Notebook.
Do you have a lucky notebook? Do you have a lucky
the
notebook or
uh,
several?
I've got stacks of them, and one of my favorite things to do is to buy a new one. it's, it's like he's going to inspire me or something. Of course, it's less expensive than buying a new guitar, which also works. But
Absolutely. We talk about guitars because the first time you had a Collins and you showed me that at the beginning. Could you talk to us a little bit about guitars, what you got there, and your favorite toys?
Well, this has been the favorite for quite some time. This is a Collings. It was a custom made job. It's 12 frets to the body instead of 14, with a cutaway, and it's short scale, so it's pretty easy to play. You know, it's got nice action, it can be very rhythmic to you. It's
I like
I mean, it
that.
just cooks. You know, it just really cooks. And it's got a beautifully balanced tone. Beautiful sustain, you know, and it's just, and Collings, they're made in Texas, you know, just outside
Austin,
of
right?
Austin.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
just outside of Austin, and they're beautiful guitars, and they're unbelievably consistent. I mean, you know,
Mm.
you almost never find one that's a dog. You know, there are this one. I can't remember. There's one of my albums though that I wrote almost entirely on this guitar, and then I I switched over and I play all the songs on the Collings now, but this one really has to be plugged in to sound right. But it's a jazz guitar, you know. It's an arch top with the F holes, and it's a carved top, not a laminated top. And it's Chinese. It's called an Eastman.
Ooh.
And the Eastman company, they worked for a long time. They worked for years trying to get it right. There's a music store that I really love in just outside of Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I I go, and they would come in once a year and show the owner what they were doing at the Eastman Company. And have we got it yet? No, he'd say, no, not yet. And then finally one year they came in and he said, oh, yeah,
Oh.
you guys are there. And so this guitar, a carved top, this guitar, if it were made in the United States, would have probably cost $10,000. And I bought it brand new for two.
Wow.
Uh, it was, and it's amazing guitar. And when it's plugged in, it just sings. It just sings, and it plays like butter. But
And I watched. There was. I'm sure it was JJ Cale. We talked about JJ Cale. I don't know if you remember when I
mhm,
met you. And
yeah,
I'm sure he said a thing in an interview about when he gets a guitar, songs happen. I'm sure it was
yeah.
JJ Cale who said that. Do you find that?
It sometimes it does. You know, sometimes it does. If it inspires you to play, I mean, getting inspired to play is part of getting into that head of where, well, if I'm going to play, do I have anything to say? You know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it feeds on itself. You know, that's part of the mystery. You know, why does it happen that way? I don't know. You know, but you know, the fingers go into the head and the head goes into the guitar and the guitar comes out and says, why don't you try this, you know, except that it's not really, you know, it's not that explicit. It's well, like everybody says, it's a little bit of a mystery. But the thing that is not a mystery, and I keep harping on that, is the discipline, the persistence to keep at it and just keep at it. And that's something that I keep coming back to. And I hate it when I give up, you know, and yet it takes me a long time. I talk about it so much because I'm right in the middle of that process right now. I'd hoped to have about 5 or 6 brand new songs to play when I came over, and I'm going to be lucky if I've got one finished and I got one that might be ready, you know. But then you start asking yourself, well, maybe I don't have anything else to say, and you know that's not true. You know, there's a million things to say, and you say it all the time. You say them to your friends, you know, but you don't pay attention to what you're saying. You know,
And have you always
it's,
written on the guitar? Has that always been the
that's
instrument?
that's my only instrument, really. I don't have. I mean, I write without an instrument because I have the tune in my head. You know, once I've learned the changes in the melody and so forth, I can sit there. I can sit at a desk and write the song because I can hear it in my head. You know, but um, then I have to actually jump up and go grab the guitar and try it, make sure it really works.
It's interesting on these songwriters because I'm finding it interesting the more I delve into songwriters and their tricks and their different things they do. And the one person who always comes up in any discussion about songwriting, I bet you'll guess who. Bob Dylan.
Oh
Always. Every
yeah.
songwriter has to be, and I get it because he's so great, and he just and I know you covered his songs, but I find any discussion with a songwriter is about songwriting. Why do you think Dylan is? Why do you think it always comes back to Dylan? Why is he so important? I mean, I'm curious because and he's I get why Great Great is, but I'd love to know why you think.
um, he never gives up. I'm right back to where we were before, you know, and I've gone through periods with Dylan and say, well, I'm not really interested in what he's doing now, and I think to myself, okay, so much for Dylan. And then I go back 2 years later and listen to the stuff I didn't listen to, and I go, well, shit. you know, he was right, and you ignore him at your peril. Um, it's part of it is the sheer volume of stuff that he puts out. If you put out that much stuff, there's going to be some winners in there. If you have a half a clue about what you're doing, you're going to have some winners, and productivity is everything, to an artist. You can't sit there and say I'm only going to write good songs. you
Yeah,
know, you can, you know, you can try. You can try to make everyone as good, but if you write 1,000 songs, the chances are you're going to come up with 100 good ones, and 100 good ones is a really good.
it's a good career.
That'd be a nice career,
It's a good career.
for
Yeah.
most people. you um, and he's always willing to try stuff. He doesn't allow himself to get stuck in ruts, and he'll look for new things, and he has an encyclopedic knowledge of music. He doesn't show it off that much, but if you ever listen to his radio show when he talks about, and you play all this, it's unbelievable the quantity of stuff he has in his head that
Yeah.
he has listened to. You know,
So that's the
it
answer.
blows your
Yeah.
mind.
That's a good answer. And let's talk a bit about influences. I mean, who would you songwriters? I mean, I know because you shared a label with Towns Van Zandt. Is that right?
Yeah, in fact, my first label was the same label he was on, and the reason I approached that label was because they had Towns Van Zandt. I thought, well, if they
Mm.
like Towns, they might like me, and they
Was he
did.
an important influence, you say, or people? Who would you pick
No,
out? Who would you pick up? No, I
no,
don't
not
hear
at
you.
all.
Okay.
No, not at all. Uh, no, he was. I mean, he was a contemporary, But
Mm,
I was already writing songs, and I was really into my thing before I'd ever heard of Towns.
mm.
It was the guys that really got me. It's interesting lyrically. The guys that I was really interested in, believe it or not, Disraeli Gears. The Cream
Okay.
album.
Okay.
When I
Well.
first heard that, and I thought, oh man, I said these guys are playing blues, but this lyric approach is like totally
Yeah.
off the wall, totally different. Nothing, And I said, okay, I don't have to. It 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 just shifted my whole focus. I don't have to look at it that way.
Mm.
Uh, you know, Here I am playing music that was really developed by illiterate sharecroppers, but I'm not an illiterate sharecropper. I love the propulsive nature of the music, and I love the compact form and what you can do with it. But I gotta start talking about stuff that means something to me,
Mm.
and that shook me up. Then two other major influences lyrically were Randy Newman and Paul Simon.
Yeah.
I mean that Randy Newman for his ability to totally paint a picture, to absolutely paint a picture that is indelible. It's almost photographic. You could reach out and touch it. and Paul Simon, because of it, he has an innate sense of language for the way words feel in your mouth. It's just it's fabulous stuff. And there's a great audio book. I don't listen to audio books very much. I like to read a lot, but I don't often listen to audio books. But there's a great book called and I can't think of the title, but it's an interview, a long interview with Paul Simon, and it's fascinating. It's fascinating to hear him talk. Just about his. I, it's the title comes from the song "The Boy in the Bubble" from the Graceland album, and mi- uh, these are the days of something of
Miracles and Wonders.
miracles and wonder. That's the
Yeah.
name of the book, and it's Malcolm Gladwell
Yeah.
that interviews him. And so, I mean, you take a song like that, like "The Boy in the Bubble," and so if you
It's great.
if you're rash enough to ask anybody what it means, the answer is it means everything. It's about everything. you
It's
know,
great. Sorry, Chris, please carry on. Sorry.
no, and that was a lyric approach that just really, you know, I said this boy's got something. And it's a funny thing because just about the time that I realized that he really had something, I read this interview with Paul Simon. He had just listened to Randy Newman, and he said, "This boy's really got something."
And he's right. It's
And he
funny
was
that when
right.
you were talking, and I was trying, not very well, trying to multitask. I was trying to Google online because there's a song of yours, and I was trying to Google it as you're talking. And I
Yeah.
thought, because you said Randy Newman, and there's a song of yours that I heard you perform it in the Blue Mountains Folk Festival, and it's brilliant. It's about, it's not political science, but it's about, I'm so sorry, I forgot the name of it. It's to do with Adam and Eve.
Oh, right. Origin of Species.
That's it. That is so great. That when I heard that straight off, I thought Randy Newman because it's great and it's satire
That's
and it's also politically really interesting. How do you use
yeah.
satire to kind of create a political message? And how I mean, it is political, but it's how do you do that without being kind of clumsy?
Being rude.
Oh, rude is fun. I like rude. But how do you still do that and make it kind of art? I mean, how does that work?
That's a good question. I have to hope. I get a bee in my bonnet. I mean, and certain things make me mad. One of the things that makes me mad is people who dismiss evolution. you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
and so I make snarky remarks about it and try to make it rhyme. And it winds up entertaining a lot of people.
Brilliant.
And in a way, I just feel like it's kind of lucky in a way. I just
It's
you
very
know.
conversational as well, writing like that. I mean, when you write like that, do you write as a conversation, or are you thinking like kind of rhyming structures like A, B, or A? You know, they do the different rhyming structures. There's a
Well,
number of.
see,
Sorry, yeah, I'd love to hear how you do that.
that's where scat singing comes in. Like when I'm singing those nonsense syllables
Yeah.
that don't really mean anything. One of the things that gets accomplished there is it shows you where the rhymes are going to fall. You know,
Wow.
because you can rhyme nonsense syllables. It doesn't have to mean anything, but you go, oh, okay, I can do an internal rhyme here, and it'll bounce off of that. And it sounds because you get that sort of rhythmic thing in there. And when you develop a rhythm with the rhyme that way, it makes the songs memorable because songs that don't rhyme are really hard to memorize. you
Yeah.
know, it's, any and that's why poetry that doesn't rhyme is very difficult to memorize.
Yeah. It's hard to
But
find songwriters. I was thinking, I just straight up thought Kelly Joe Phelps because he quite often would write songs that didn't rhyme. I remember being
I love
fascinated
it.
by his lyrics. They were the late great Kelly Joe Phelps. I
Yeah.
mean, but yeah, I mean, so with that, I mean, do you have? There's another thing kind of to do with it's obviously you're not like Towns Van Zandt, but one of the things I loved about Towns was he'd always find that way of changing the chord progression at the moment when the rhyme and the meter would fit. And great songwriters like yourself have a way of doing that, what seems effortless, knowing the moment to switch the chord based on when the rhythm of the rhyme fits. I don't know how do you find
Well, it
that? How do you
depends.
fit that jigsaw puzzle?
Well, in my case, the changes come first. So the rhyme is made to fit the music.
Yeah.
That's and I'd be hard pressed to explain it. It just seems obvious to me, that this is where it has to move. This is where it changes. This is where it's going to fall off. And again, to not to harp on it, but that's the beauty of the scat singing, because you can. It doesn't have to have meaning.
Mm.
You. It's almost like McCartney said, when he wrote Yesterday, that the original title of it was Scrambled Eggs, because it has the same rhythm as Yesterday, Scrambled Eggs. It's the same accented syllables and so forth. So
Wow.
if you have nonsense syllables, then they fall that way. You can listen to it and you can say, okay, the rhyme has to fall here. And then if the line continues over that hump, that change, and then you can have a rhyme on the other side, it'll get you across. It's a,
Titles are crucial though. Songwriter. A lot of songwriters pick titles out. Do you collect titles? I've heard a few songwriters say that titles are like you collect them.
I don't well, I like good ones. Titles are always an afterthought to me. Sometimes I don't know what to call. Yeah, I get the song written and then I say, what the hell am I going to call this?
That's funny. And
Yeah.
so many, it's great reading through all the people who've covered your. I'm jumping around it trying to. My notes are in about 44 different places. So different people who've covered your music: Diana Krall, Josh Ritter, Bonnie Raitt, Dave Alvin, Tim O'Brien. I mean, that's Emmylou Harris. I was listening to her beautiful version of your song. That must be a nice feeling.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Believe me, it is. It's validation. It's the realization that you made something that doesn't need you. It exists on its own. And it's like raising a kid. It's like raising a child, and one day you realize that the kid knows how to cross the street on its own.
Mm.
You don't have to hold its hand anymore. It can go out there and make its own way in the world.
That's beautiful, man. That's really. Is there any of those you're particularly proud of? Any particular songwriter who's done one of your songs that
Well,
you
you
feel?
mentioned a couple of them there. Aoife O'Donovan did a beautiful version of. Whoa, I can remember. See, I can remember my own titles, but one of the things that blows my mind sometimes in hearing other people do my songs is how they found that in the song, because they'll do something different with it, and I mean, to me, that's the essence of covering a song, is that you found something in it that the original didn't have, or you found something in the song that the original didn't emphasize, and so you bring that out. And so I sit there sometimes and listen to people do my tunes, and I go, "Wow, how did they find that? I never knew that was it there."
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, and it's crazy, But I love Diana Krall doing "Love You Like a Man," and I love Bonnie Raitt doing it too, And Diana, and here's the funny thing is that Diana heard Bonnie do it. She didn't learn it from me,
Wow.
She heard Bonnie do it, and did the tune, and yet it's entirely different. It's entirely different, when she does it, from the way Bonnie does it. And of course, Bonnie doesn't sound anything like the way I do it, because I do it from a guy's point of view, But
Can I ask a bit just briefly about Bonnie Raitt because she's just won a
yeah,
Grammy and well deserved, an incredible artist. You were good
yeah,
friends with her. How did that
yeah.
begin?
Well, when
If
I'm
I can
back in.
ask, you know, maybe it's a bit, maybe I
No,
don't.
it goes back. It's an interesting story because she, um, back in Cambridge, when I first moved up to Cambridge, 1966, 67, in there, and I I was a year out of New Orleans, and all these old rediscovered bluesmen were playing. Skip James, John Hurt, and they all were. A lot of them were managed. Son House, they were all managed in part or in whole by Dick Waterman, and Dick Waterman lived in Cambridge, and so my other pals and I, who played all these little coffee houses on Beacon Hill and in and around Boston, used to go, well, let's go over to Dick's house. Somebody might be over there, you know. And usually there was somebody, and they'd be sitting around drinking whiskey in the living room and playing guitars. You know?
Yeah, yeah.
So Dick Waterman had this girlfriend, this little redheaded gal named Bonnie. She was always hanging around. That's how I met her.
Wow.
And you know, and I knew her. I'd known her for 3 years before I even knew that she played the guitar.
Wow. That's a cool story. That's a cool person to walk in and meet drinking whiskey. I like that a lot.
Uh,
I like that a lot. Watching you live was great. I saw you quite a lot in that period in Australia, and I saw you in. You probably don't remember this story, but I think it's funny. I've told it since. It was in Port Fairy Folk Festival, and it was an Arlo. It was, sorry, Woody Guthrie tribute gig,
oh,
and
I
there was a
remember that.
bunch of
I remember
people
that.
doing songs. Arlo Guthrie, I think, is it Sarah Lee Guthrie? It was
It
Arlo
was it
Guthrie.
was Woody. They were doing Woody songs, I
Yeah,
think.
and I performed the song, right, and you used to came up to me and you went, "That was really good, but it wasn't Woody Guthrie." And I remember that, and I was like, "Oh damn!" And I was like, "Oh well." No, people were liking it, but I remember I thought it was funny because I thought, "Man, I should have googled that." You went, "That was great, but it wasn't Woody." It's a funny, funny story, but
It
yeah,
is
no,
funny.
it was good fun. It was good fun, but
I'm glad you thought it was funny. I wouldn't have thought if it was funny if I was in your position.
nah, if you'd have got it on stage, I'd have got the hump. I thought it was hilarious. I like stuff
Uh,
like that. I like dark humor. But yeah, Chris, it's been amazing, man. Thank you so much for chatting to me. It's been a real pleasure.
that's great. Mm. Let's see. This is a new one. Yeah, the Lord was feeling lonesome. The Lord is down. He's singing the blues. Nobody calls on me. The prayers are far between and few. And if it wasn't for the devil, there wouldn't be a lot to do. Well, speaking of the devil, you got to give the devil his due. He's down in the details, quoting scripture from his point of view. He says the Lord knows he needs me, but he don't want to believe it's true. He thinks he doesn't know me, 'cause he don't look at the back of his head. But my face is in the pillow when he's lying on his back in bed. And when he's singing beat the devil, he's beating on himself instead. It all started in the garden when he opened up with a single pair. He said, go forth and multiply. Now everybody wants a share. He'll get no peace on earth till he goes knocking and there's nobody there. So I'm just trying to keep him busy so he don't give up and blow us away. So if they ask why you a sinner and you don't know what to say, just say the devil made me do it to save the world for one more day. Yeah, the devil made me do it to save the world for one more day.
That was so great. Beautiful, man. Thank you.
You're welcome.